Ms. Leanne Burchell, who's the Director of Finance. Chief Swan, you have the floor.
All right, so I would like to first say good evening to everybody. It's always a pleasure to actually come as the chief of such a great department, and to be in this situation is just an honor to be a servant under these times. If I took a moment to just thank not just the council, but also I thank the mayor's staff and all the finance and everyone for such a 2020 year, right? But it's been a very challenging year, but with all the challenges, I just want to take a moment to brag on the Nashville Fire Department. And when you think about the Nashville Fire Department, I see here it says fire and EMS. The Nashville Fire Department encompasses the EMS division. It's one department, fire and EMS, the fire marshal's office, and then umbrella under that is also the Office of Emergency Management. So this year we've had everything from the tornadoes, COVID, the ratio, civil unrest, flooding, several mutual aids, the presidential debate, of course the Nashville bombing. That was all in 2020, but it would go without saying that 2021, it seemed like God woke up and said round two, and we went into winter storms and the flooding event. The fire department, like all the other departments, had to deal with all of these events. But the thing that made me more proud of this department is they stood tall and did the job that was expected of them. There's a high expectation from our department, and the men and women of the department met every one of them. We have a department that made over 120,000 calls, incidents, from January 2019 to December 31, 2020. That included a little bit more than 13,000 fires. Then fire response with EMS is about 85,000. So when you think about the fire department, one of the things that I've been trying to work on is to get people to not just think about fires. Of course, fires are devastating, and they can totally ravage a complete city. But we are really an all-hazardous department. We deal with everything: shootings, stabbings, homicides, suicides, drownings, overdose, suspicious packages, unknown, tornadoes, right? Civil unrest. Anything that happens in this city, when you call 911, the fire department is involved in it. A lot of times we get hidden in the shadows of the event, and we're not here to get attention, but it is important that the department is recognized. And I was very pleased with this year's budget proposal by the mayor. I've been with the department, it'll be 26 years as of September 1st. And we have some other members that's been on longer. And we have never experienced such gratitude of looking into our department and seeing the needs that we have. So the department itself, for the last several years, have undergone tremendous strains. The city has not just grown up, but it's grown out. Our department has been stretched at every end. So this year in our budget proposal, the mayor was gracious enough to see fit to get us to our halfway point, which we're very, very thankful of that. The department not only serves as a first responder, taking care of the citizens, visitors, and residents of Davidson County, but we reach out in other areas as well. I want everybody to understand there's so many things that we deal with, from trench, high angle, ropes training, so many different things that this department does every day. But some highlight points is our Tennessee Heart program. This is a program that is one of the first of its kind. We work closely with the Tennessee Air Guard, also our THP partnership, where we do a lot of aerial training for helicopter rescue training. We also have a very detailed and beloved BLAZE program, which stands for Breaking Limitation, Accepting Zero Excuses, where we go into the 12 core high schools. And there's several other, our hockey team, the things that they do, the money that they raise for so many different organizations, Box 55 and others that really just give so much more back to the city. So again, we are truly partners in so many ways with this city. But again, the Nashville Fire Department, to me, is the best department in infrastructure. And why wouldn't I say that? I'm the chief of that department. But it could be backed up by all the actions and things that we do. So I thank you for the opportunity just to give a shout out to them. And then because we're umbrellaed under the OEM is umbrella under the fire department, even though they're not here today because of the fact that they're one of the departments that don't have to be here, I'm also the director of the Office of Emergency Management, which touch everything in the city. Again, the proposed budget really helped the Office of Emergency Management out where it was needed. And again, I want to just acknowledge the men and women there as well. We would not be able to do it without them. So thank you, and I'm willing to answer any questions.
Thank you. Thank you so much for what y'all have done in this remarkable 12 months. Who would have thought of all the things we would have had to react to? I have talked to a number of firefighters that have explained multiple times the importance of having 4 firefighters for every engine, and that y'all have had to operate with only 3 for a number of years just because of budget constraints. So can you just for the folks that we're going to be explaining why we are being generous with the fire department when we're just meeting your basic needs at this. So if you can kind of talk over why it's important to have 4 to an engine and how close we're getting you to that, and what other shortfalls y'all have lived with, and what the end goal is, and how close we're getting you to there. I think that would just be helpful for us to realize how important it is to fund this budget for you.
Absolutely. Thank you for that opportunity. You're absolutely right. The importance here, and we work with Bruce and Diego, the metrics, and it's so difficult to explain or to try to put things in metrics when it comes to emergency response. If we had one person on that fire piece of equipment, when the bell goes off, they're going to jump in that piece of equipment and they're going to get to the scene. Now, of course, there's a lot of things that will contribute to the time there, time of day, where they're traveling to. But the point here is, once you get there, you don't have the proper staff to actually do the job that's expected from you. So we have to be properly staffed. We've had, for many years, we've operated under the pretense of having 3 personnel. Again, that is the bare minimum, but due to the 2 in and 2 out rule, if you get on the scene and you don't have the proper amount of personnel to take care of that scene, you had to wait for enough piece of equipment. So the problem here is that we, not having the proper staffing, we have to dispatch more equipment. So therefore, instead of having on the typical, and there's no such thing as typical, but let's just say you had a house fire and you would run 2 engines and a truck and a rescue, well, we would have to run, an additional truck, another engine, simply just to have not the equipment needed, but the personnel off of it. So the importance of being fully staffed will help in several ways by allowing you to be able to get there in an efficient, quick time, and then be able to act and be able to do the job that's needed. So with the current proposed budget, we have been blessed with 40 personnel for fire and 20 for EMS. Now, keep in mind, Council Lady Allen, you made a great point. You're being generous, but you're not being generous because that's fluffing the fire department. We're still at the halfway point, and that's not creating any more stations. That is just trying to sustain what we currently have. But this is going to be a big impact, and we're really gracious. And I think the Mayor Cooper, and I work with him almost daily for several months due to the COVID, and then the team he's put together. I work closely with Kristen Wilson and Bill Phillips. They understand operations and understand what it takes. And even with the proposed budget granted to us, they understood that that was just a halfway point again. So if we have the proper staffing, we'll be able to do the job efficient and more effectively. And every time you run a piece of equipment, you understand that that's putting more wear and tear on our fleet, which we have already heavy pieces of equipment running up and down the road. Then you pull in equipment out of another person's zone. So now you're having to backfill. It's like playing a chess match. So, and then it helps with overtime. Of course, it helps a little bit with overtime as well. But being fully staffed is, we're at our halfway point, and we're just so happy to get, this will give us a little relief because attrition plays a big role with that. Trying to, by the time we hire somebody, it takes 8 months from the time we pick them to get them to the academy and on the streets. So this will be a very needed relief.
See, I got Councilwoman Benedict, then Bradford, Druffel, Gamble.
Did I cut line?
I have no idea.
All right. I might have, but that's to talk to my friend Chief Swan. Thank you for being here, and thank you for good work. It was great to see you every Thursday for every week of every month last year on every COVID call.
Wow.
A lot that was on your plate just with that, in addition to everything else. Thank you for that. I've seen three firefighters on a truck in my district, and it is scary. And I have seen the dangers that those two folks are running into the fire, and the one is grabbing the hose to hook it up to the nearby fire hydrant before the water's out on the truck. It is scary. We've got to get to 4.
Yeah, absolutely.
So a couple of questions. Fleet repair. I'm curious about fleet repair and also future fire halls. So today, as I understand it, and I could be wrong, so correct me if I'm wrong. An engine gets a flat tire somewhere. What happens with that today, and how does it get repaired, and how quickly is that truck back on the road?
Okay, that's a good question. First, let me say that we did new stations. If you don't mind, I'll hit the first question first. You know, as you guys know, we did open up station 37s and 32s. Again, these were not brand new stations, but they were brand new fire halls, but not brand new stations, meaning they're just rebuilds. Very, very great stations. If you haven't had a chance to go by and look at that, please do. Very proud of that, and thank the city for allowing us to do that. And then we're also very hopeful. The mayor has also granted us to rebuild the fire station 2s, which is a very needed station, and we're just so happy with that. Now, our fleet situation, I want to first just state that our fleet department, working with Velvet and Stacy Wall, is a complete joy. We understand that a lot of things, it's all about money and it's about budget and funding. Matter of fact, we've got, I think, $13 million for a heavy fleet this year. Was it 14, Leanne? I'm sorry. 14 million. But again, our equipment is costly, but so is your life, and you're worth it. So understand that. So the process is difficult because if you do have a piece of equipment break down, it depends. If it's light fleet, it'll go, we'll get it to like Firestone, and we got some other partners. But if it's heavy fleet, then we have like Cumberland. Who else we have that we see? Firestone and Cumberland. So it's sort of subcontracted out.
And I'm sorry, I didn't mean to go down too much of a rabbit hole there. It might be more of a question for general services, but I'm just thinking, I've heard, so, you know, I stop in a fire hall sometimes when I'm just out wandering around all over the city, not just in my district. And although I love the folks in my district.
Right, absolutely.
I think the concern becomes that it has to be taken to someplace off-site, and then you run short one engine, for instance, in a hall somewhere. So is there anything in your budget that's something that we can improve, or is that more of a general services concern?
Well, it will be general services, but still it's our needs and asks and our reserve units. There's no secret that our fleet, again, we were very blessed with, as I said earlier, the $14 million. But, you know, our equipment is so expensive. We pretty much get, I'm sure, the biggest part of all the funding that goes to general services. We get the bigger portion of it. But we do have reserve units that we have, and of course, all of that needs to be improved. But as I stated earlier, and I understand you going by the fire stations, and people are probably a little emotional because they just experienced something that things could always be improved. But we have, and our heavy fleet has improved immensely over the last few months. So I'm very pleased with that. Is there room for improvement? Absolutely. And fleet themselves, well, I mean, I'm sure general services would tell you that. My biggest concern right now is our light fleet, because we have the oldest light fleet in the infrastructure, and that's something that we'll have to address, and it is on our agenda, and I know, of course, the mayor's office knows about it, so that's what we're focusing on.
Thank you, and I certainly didn't mean to say that anybody out in your halls are, complaining
Can I have their
about
names,
anything.
please? What station were they? 18th?
Jade Metters?
Yeah, I know her very well.
And I'm going to do my best not to catch any more rides in the ambulances.
But hopefully it was, even though it was experience, I hope you had a great experience from the
Jade was the driver.
situation.
Jade was the driver, and she hit every bump on the James Robertson Bridge. But we'll let that go. Thank you, Chief. Appreciate it.
I expect a vote from you then.
Well, I'm going to text her right now and let her know.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Councilman Bradford.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Director Chief, for coming out and talking to us today. And I forgot to do this with MMPD and thanking them, but this past year has been tough on everybody, and not just OEM and MMPD, but for the fire and emergency as well. So thank you for your service. Thank you for the service of everybody in your department. A couple of questions. So staying on the topic of fleet, so I have Percy Priest Lake that edges part of my district, and we know there's, especially this time of year with parties and everything going on, there's going to be water emergencies. And I recall a couple of weeks ago, there was a major emergency where OEM had to go out and rescue people who were trapped on one of the islands because of the weather. Is there enough resources, enough boats currently, or not just Percy Priest, but all of our waterways with OEM? Is there any need for additional boats, manpower?
Well, when you ask that question that way, council member, of course, I'm going to tell you there's always room for improvement. But one of the things I am proud about is the fire department in OEM, we talk about swift water training and our boats, and what you mentioned as far as rescuing someone from one of the islands because the weather got bad. One of the things I have to remember in this field, every day we deal with people getting injured, people losing their lives, situations that from water incidents to drownings to diving incidents, that we are there. We do it all the time. So sometimes when I hear you even say that, I'm like, well, that's sort of the normal thing that we deal with. But our resources there are sufficient to what we need. And the good thing about our water rescue, we don't have to have the hard cap boats all the time. We can use the more the tubing boats. So we are equipped and trained, highly trained for that situation.
Thank you for that. Next question I have. I know OEM has done a lot, especially this past year, working with social service with the homeless shelters. So, in this current budget, do you feel that there's enough resources provided to help maintain OEM's partnership and assisting with our emergency shelters?
Okay. So, and let me clarify again that the OEM is under the fire department, and I am the director chief of our fire and OEM. So that's why the question has been asked, and we're mentioning OEM. And I'm glad you're doing that, because what OEM does, fire does, our people cross over in and back and forward all the time. And yes, we deal with the homeless. We deal with social services, with the fairgrounds, and of course with our man's mission. We're involved with everything when it comes to going on in the city. Now, when it comes to funding, we're not the department that deals with the funding part of it. What we do from OEM's and fire's perspective is we are a resource gatherer. We make sure that if there is a shelter that needs to be found, we help facilitate that shelter, and our partners, the sheriff department, which is in the back room, give, and PD as well, but especially the sheriff department, they help us with staffing that for security purposes, and then also we make sure that from the Red Cross to social services to any other private partners that we may have are very aware of what's going on. And so we just make sure that we assist them in getting all the resources, but we don't deal with the funding part. That would be more for social services and as far as for the infrastructure of Nashville Metro, it would be social services.
Thank
But
you.
great question. Thank you.
And going with personnel, we've already touched on that. This current budget just brings you back to pretty much a baseline, and that it's halfway to your goal. What would, for the audience that's watching or listening, what is your goal? Like, we're halfway there, but what would be your fully staffed numbers?
With the proposed budget, it moves us to 1334. But to be fully staffed, that's going to pull us to 14,900. So 1,409. That would get us operational. That would put us to full staffing. And to break it down, there'd be 30 more fire, 20 more EMS, and then our fire marshal's office is doing a evaluation at this time. We've got a new fire marshal there, so we're giving him enough time to really do a good evaluation. But right now we can clarify the need for at least 20, so that will bring us up, then it would be exactly and then facility maintenance, we need 5 more staffing there, because facility maintenance for us is major, because we still own and have to take care of, Leanne, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's 32 fire stations that still belong to us, and our facility maintenance do an excellent job. These guys are tremendous going out to the stations and trying to correct all the wrongs to right, and we're about 5 short there, so we're for operational level, we need 75 more people, and it will bring us to 1409.
And just to clarify, that's just make sure every current station and truck is fully staffed. That's not adding stations. So kind of a follow-up then, based on the size area that we have here in Davidson County, do we have enough stations? If not, what is that magic number?
Well, the answer to that, I think, is no surprise, but absolutely not. Of course, we don't have enough stations, but we've already identified in our capital plan the 4 stations in the 4 corners of Davidson County, and we understand that requires, the fire station itself, and then the personnel, and then there's a formula. We use Nashville Next. We use our, we look at our own run volumes to determine where we get the most run volume from, what area, and absolutely, as I stated earlier, the city is just not growing up, it's growing out, so there is a deep need for additional fire stations, and we have identified 4.
All right, that's good to know. And the conversation we were having earlier about trucks being out of use, you having to use multiple trucks because of staffing levels. Just from someone who deals with being efficient on a daily basis, I can definitely understand the frustration from your side of knowing that we're having to pull trucks from other areas in order to ensure the staffing levels are there, and it's the extra wear and tear. So at the end of the day, over the last few years, while we've tried to save money by holding back on investment for our fire department, it's actually costing us more in the long run, because, as you said, we're having to almost double the amount of trucks for certain calls. The last question I had, you mentioned light fleet. I've never heard that term before, so for myself, any other colleagues that might not know that, and for those watching, what is a light?
Yes, great question. I'm glad you give me a chance to clarify that. So our heavy fleet is like the heavy apparatuses, our trucks, our fire engine, our rescues, our ambulances. Those are the heavy pieces of equipment that you're going to mostly identify and recognize going up and down the road. The light fleet can be everything from a Tahoe to a pickup truck to our sedans. Those are our light fleets. And as I mentioned earlier, we are to totally, and General Service can definitely back this up, but our light fleet is in a very dangerous situation, a dangerous state. But again, one of the things that we do at the fire department, we are problem solvers. We fix problems, and we make sure that we get the best bang for our buck. And again, to totally replace all the fleet that is needed at this time in the light fleet, it'd be about $4.1 million to actually accomplish that. And again, that will put us where we need to be. But that's the definition of a light fleet.
Thank you. And I just got one more follow-up. I'm sorry, Chair, when he mentioned that. So with the idea and the knowing that we have to replace this light fleet, most of these vehicles, some of them might come with a hybrid or EV model. Are we looking at, as we're going to replace these vehicles, to try and go with hybrid or EV in order to, again, like I mentioned during MPD's hearing, saving costs on the fuel and also being good stewards of our environment? Is there work being done to make sure as we're updating the fleet, we're upgrading?
Well, absolutely. I think and General Services can speak a little better on this, but I will assure you that one of the things that me personally, for myself, and it flows downward, is that we always try to make sure that we are relevant to the times and very futuristic in our thinking. We got approached about a fire engine, actually, and it was the hybrid fire engine. And of course, right now it's in more of the West, California, and places like that, and they're doing some experimenting. And we understand, too, just geographically where you're located in the States, it plays a big role when you start talking about this heavy equipment. But for as light fleet, absolutely, we're looking, especially like our fire marshal's office and training, we're always looking for ways to be more conservative. I mean, that's just the way it's going, I mean, everywhere. So great question, and my answer is yes.
Councilman Druffel.
Chief, thanks for all you do. I really appreciate it. Talked to a couple of EMTs recently, and both of them had mentioned the same thing, that a lot of issues they're dealing with are mental illness when they get these calls. So they're more than the medical issues and take more time. Of course, they get to the hospital. And in the hospital, they end up taking more energy and time. Is there any way to address that in any way? I was just curious. I know it's a very difficult call, but how are you addressing that, or is there a better way to address that?
Can you ask the question one more time? I think I lost you in the middle of, you said when they make a call, they go to the hospital?
Yeah, so an EMT, an ambulance gets there, they end up dealing with more of a mental illness or more of a problem than a medical problem.
Right.
This is not my personal experience, but a couple of comments from two different EMTs. So their position was that's causing probably more time and energy. It's not necessarily efficiency, it's a matter of the time and energy they do. It gets a little bit, not violent, but it gets more difficult to deal with. That translates into, of course, getting to the hospital and having a similar issue that carries through the hospital. Not that we don't need to treat them, it's an important part. But is there something that we can do or should we do to handle that part of the equation or the mental illness versus more of the straight medical issue?
Right. Well, that's an interesting question, a great question, because I think that's what's going on now. That's just not a police department issue. That's a first responder issue. And when we start talking about mental issues in this day and age, will you make a call and you have a patient that has a mental problem? How do we deal with that? And that requires a lot of training. And I know I'm going to give kudos again to the Sheriff's Department. I know that Sheriff Hall has talked about the mental issues and how to treat that a little bit, and I'm sure he will address that. But as far as the responders' point of view, what we try to do is our training, our in-service, our training, we deal with all of that, and we try to make sure that we give. The biggest fear that I have as a director chief is, of course, somebody not going home the next shift. But then the next thing is that that the men and women that work for this department don't have the tools needed to do their job. And when it comes to mental crises of that nature, we do a lot of in-service training. What we try to do, if we see a big change in the type calls that we're making, we make sure that we try to give our men and women the most up-to-date training that they can. And then also we make sure that training and the treatment for our men and women, because, it's a cumulative effect. I mean, as I stated earlier, you deal with multiple different type of calls. And for every individual, each call is different. And for some people, certain calls don't bother them, but I always found personally, if you're dealing with something that because we're just like everyone else, we got family problems, family issues. We have people in our family that has events as well, and when you make that type of call, again, it does take its toll. And I know we have our critical incident stress management team that we deal with interdepartmental with our chaplain program, and then of course our employee assistant program as well. And I know I sort of ran around the bush to answer your question, but we try to make sure that we keep our men and women trained on every area, from diversity to and mental crisis and understanding. Here's another one, dementia. These are things that we deal with all the time, and it can be overtaxing because you have to show an enormous amount of patience. And at the same time, you have to make sure that you're able to protect yourself. So, again, that's an ongoing problem, but I am very optimistic that along with the rest of the departments and as we evolve to be better, we'll be on board, I promise you that.
Councilwoman Gamble.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Chief Swan, and your department for all the work you've done over the past 18 months, particularly as it relates to the bombing incident in downtown Nashville. It is a miracle that we didn't have more loss of life with that incident, and that is a direct result of our first responders and the response that you all gave to that event. I do have two questions. You mentioned that this budget includes funding for about 60 new positions, 40 firefighters. To clarify, does that give you the number of firefighters you need in order to have four firefighters on your trucks at all of the stations? And how does that impact the new stations? And also, can you give us an example of the kind of equipment that you are now able to buy that has been needed? Having served on the COVID-19 Financial Oversight Committee, that it became so clear to me how we were so behind and using antiquated equipment. Can you give us an example of what kind of equipment you'll be able to purchase now that will help save lives and keep our community safe going forward?
Thank you very much, Councilor Lady Gamble. And we share the same committee for the bombing after action review. Well, the latter question you asked, I want to clarify the committee pertaining to the COVID, the CARES Act funding, we actually didn't receive any of that. So I'm hopeful that if there is another package that come down, that will be some designated toward public safety, period. I will be very biased. Of course, you know my needs, but I can assure you that there's other departments that need it as well. But our fleet is the oldest fleet, and we do need that. So again, I thank you for that opportunity just to spearhead that. And again, I want to acknowledge that I deal closely with Kristen Wilson and Mary Jo and finance and others, and they're all aware of that. So it's just a pleasure to be heard and understand how that works. And then the other question, the clarification, and I want to try to do this. It's always difficult to explain. Full staffing means on every piece of equipment you have the 5 personnel that you need. But you're going to always have one off. You have to. That's just the way it works because of your vacation, the granted time that you're allowed to take off. So you always have one off. So when we say we have 3 on a piece of equipment, one's off, so you got 2. So we got to borrow it from somewhere else. And this is always confusion. I think maybe I'm just not good at explaining it. But so when we say full staffing, that means you will have 5 on a piece of equipment. So you will run with 4. So that ties that in. We want to run with 4 personnel. And the proposed budget, even though it made a tremendous filling a void spot. We understand that we're still short 30 fire and 20 EMS. And I will say that, but this 40 firefighters will be such a needed, and it will bring about some relief that is needed because, quite frankly, the men and women of this department are just wore out. I mean, they were out because, again, we don't have the flexibility or the latitude to, due to our short staff numbers, to give adequate time. So, and listen, we got a department, you're made up of mostly type A personality, and they believe that in a time of hardship is a time for you to be serving. They got the servant heart, and that's what they do. And that makes makes my job easier, and of course it makes me proud. But the 40 firefighters, again, and the 20 EMS personnel, and also, let me add, they're going to fully staff my training center, which is going to be a tremendous blessing because our training center wasn't funded. So what that meant was I had to pull from my field and put down there in order to just have a training center to actually put people through put recruits through. So with the proposed budget, it will be a very needed and a blessing for us, and we're very appreciative of that. As when we had our budget hearing, I think it was just a blessing because not only did we have a lot of support from you, and I know most of the council member first terms even understand the tremendous need that we have, but especially ones that's been here for a minute. You know, guys, I've been singing this song for a long time. And this is no reflection on any administration or any of that. That's not what I'm meaning. But what I'm saying, I was very pleased that the current administration, and from the finance to our operations, they understand that. And then we had our metrics to help facilitate with that as well. So we appreciate that. And this will make a big dent into our already depleted department. But again, we are 30 firefighters short, 20 EMS. We're about 75 short where we want to be in operations.
And Chief Swan, for those 75 additional personnel, what's the total cost for those positions?
I will have to get back with you on that. I know that's We know for, let me give Leanne a minute, but I'm going to put you on the spot, Leanne. She's got it.
And while she's looking for that, in your questionnaire, you said that you had 21 and a half FTE vacancies. Can you explain what those positions are?
Yeah, when we answered that question, that was field operational positions, and our problem is the attrition number. This year alone, we had, 70? How many people did we had? As of today, we had 73 people who left. We've got our department, we have 254 personnel who could walk out the door tomorrow or today. And that means they've met their time limit, their age, and their time on. Trying to keep up with that. By the time, again, with attrition, you all understand how that works. By the time the 21 from the authorized positions we had 21 vacancies. By the time we get them in class and out of class, we're already behind, again, another 20 or 35. It's like a dog trying to catch his tail, right? We never can catch up. So this number of 40 at least will help with that. It will help take a little of that pressure off because, again, we have been very creative with what we do. We want to make sure that we give everybody a Class A service, and that's what the Nashville Fire Department does. But we are very creative. I think Leanne has those numbers.
It's 5.5 million, roughly.
5.5 million. For the total,
For fire and EMS.
for fire and EMS, it would be 5.5 million. So that means, and that's not taking into consideration the fire marshal's office and the facility maintenance.
So that
That
would
she
be
can work that.
I think you said 30 for fire, it was
20 for EMS, and the fire marshal's office would be 20.
About 8.5 million.
So altogether, it'd be 8.5 million.
Okay.
That's a rough estimate.
And for the vacancies that you currently have, if you were able to fill them, do you have the money in your budget to do so?
Yes, we actually have, yes, we do, Chair. We actually have a class going through right now, or actually, we graduated a class, and we're preparing for a next class that's coming up in July, and hopefully the council will back this proposed budget, and we'll have another 40 fire and 20 EMS. We look forward to that opportunity.
All right, we are at time. I am scanning the room for last-second questions. Seeing none, thank you so much, Chief Swan and Ms. Burchell, for your time.
Thank you, guys.
And coming up, we'll have our last hearing with the Sheriff's Office. So if you all could come up, and we'll give folks a couple of minutes to breathe and get set up.